Welcome back, and joining me for a closer look of the day's trading session is Jordan Toy from Legacy Family Wealth. Thank you so much for your time. Jordan, it's been quite a busy week, and I guess it's getting busier with a lot of these catalysts only coming in from today. And of course, one of those we will get at around 8 p.m. South African time, and that is the Fed's latest interest rate decision. What is the mood in the markets in terms of what could transpire at that press briefing?
So I heard you mention in your intro that it's widely expected that there will be a cut, which I think is spot on, right? When I was looking at Fed futures pricing, it's like 90, close to 100% kind of thing. So not to say that that's correct, but it's very much expected. I suppose it's difficult, and I saw a great quote earlier today, which basically said, it's a difficult environment for the Fed when you're pursuing two different goals and you're getting absolutely zero data on one of those. So, and I mean, even on the inflation front, they've had, the only data piece they've really had has been that CPI print. And we know that the focus is primarily, or not primarily, but has shifted increasingly to the labor market, at least for the Fed voting members. So that is a difficult environment for them to operate in. They didn't have September payrolls numbers. So I think on that basis that they're largely going to sort of keep the ship moving in the same direction. Hopefully the US government shutdown ends sooner rather than later, and that they have more information to work with. I think what will be more interesting to see is the statement afterwards. Obviously, I think I've said it a couple of times, but when there's a high probability of a cut and everyone expects a cut and you actually get that outcome, then the focus increasingly becomes, what does Jerome Powell say in the press conference? Are there any clues in sort of the wording of the statement or what he says in that conference? Yeah,
it's actually quite interesting because a lot of us don't think that because inflation is still not at the 2% target, it is still elevated. So in that kind of environment, you would expect them to hold or to hike. So it's quite interesting. You mentioned that the focus has shifted now to the labor market, where they are actually forced now to reduce the interest rates. Well, let's talk about Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. They are due to meet tomorrow in South Korea after that bloodbath that they caused about two and a half weeks ago in the markets. What is the expectation of that meeting?
So it's been quite a whirlwind to keep up with.
Yeah,
it feels like a bad relationship, but it's been sort of on again, off again. It was up in the air a few weeks ago whether this meeting was even going to take place. It seems like it is going to be going ahead, even though from the Chinese side they haven't really confirmed that they will actually be meeting. But let's assume that they will have those discussions, and we've had some sort of positive news in the sort of today and the last week. So we had the announcement that China's sort of made a symbolic purchase of US soybeans. So we know there's, from the US side, there's a few things they want. So Trump wants the Chinese to start buying US produced soybeans again. That's obviously a big constituent that elected Trump, right? Is US sort of farmers, and then you have the US also wanting, a bit more control in terms of global trade. And from the Chinese side, less tariffs. There has been talk recently now of NVIDIA's Blackwell chips being available to China. So we'll see if that actually transpires. I think that the US knows that they have to bargain here because China largely controls global rare earths supply. So it's not just a one-sided negotiation, and that's why I think you're starting to see some of these compromises coming through from the US side. We'll see what comes out in the wash in that meeting, but I think that there's going to be a bit of give and take from both sides to hopefully get to a reasonable outcome for global trade. Okay,
well, as you're talking about NVIDIA, we actually saw its market cap hitting the $5 trillion mark, and this is a day after Apple hit $4 trillion. And this is, of course, ahead of those big Mag 7 earnings. We have 5 of them, 3 of them today and 2 of them tomorrow. Are investors just building on high hopes at this point?
Yes, I mean, obviously incredible to see, the first, I believe it is the first company to hit 5 trillion market cap. Largely off the back of that news that, potentially now China's market is reopened to NVIDIA, because the CEO of NVIDIA mentioned, I believe it was in the last couple of weeks, that he said China's pretty much closed off to them at this stage. So that's the optimism, sort of the tailwind behind NVIDIA specifically. But I mean, we're at the crux of it now in terms of earnings season. This is, I heard you mentioning again in the intro, we have big names like Microsoft, Meta announcing later this evening. We've got Amazon and 1 or 2 others tomorrow that are, I think, going to dictate really the direction of travel for the last part of the year. I mean, there's a nice quote, I think, which is that there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. And not to overstate it, but this is a really big week. I mean, we have, I think in today and tomorrow alone, we have 25% of the market cap of the S&P 500 reporting. That also speaks to some of the concentration that's going on in some of these bigger tech names. But the AI sort of trade has fueled a lot of this year-to-date gains, and we know that it's quite a narrow percentage of the S&P 500 that's driven a lot of that. So it is key what happens today and tomorrow. We'll be looking at what the management teams and the companies as a whole are talking about in terms of CapEx, what their plans are going forward, as well as earnings. We want to see, ultimately, is there tangible evidence of these, all this AI infrastructure producing additional revenue, whether it be for these hyperscalers or some of their customers.
Okay, well, just before we get to your stock pick, let's quickly touch on Astral Foods. They produced a year-end trading update today, expecting an increase in their bottom line. And the company really saying that it's been focusing on rebuilding and restoration as well. So just talk to me about what came out for you in this update.
So the numbers look pleasing. I mean, earnings per share and headline earnings per share sort of mid-single digits to 15% there and thereabouts, I believe, for headline earnings per share is the range that they've given. So a pleasing turnaround from the period, leading up to this. I think the share price has done relatively well in the last 90 days. Maybe not today. I see that it's sort of relatively flat, but over the last 90 days, it's quite strongly up. And I think that is off the back of two factors, right? So you had them talking about their feed side of the business doing better. So previously, they had the situation where you had sort of a lot of cost pressures on the input side, and then you had poultry price pressure to the downside. So you had this double whammy of increased costs and reduced sort of output
very thin
price.
margins or non-existent margins.
So and we've seen that sort of turn around a bit. We've had improved pricing on the input side, and as well as output pricing moving the right direction that way. So I think those are the key things that are moving in their favor, and we'll see what the full results look like. But I think a decent trading update out of Astral.
Nice.
We'll have to see the detail in the full results.
Okay, well, let's get to your stock pick for today. What are you choosing?
So I wanted to talk about Netflix. It's not that recent. I think earnings was last week. Yes, earnings was last week. But I think just a really solid company all around. And everyone seemed to focus on the sort of one-off Brazilian, what we anticipate to be the one-off Brazilian tax authority, sort of $500 million, $600 million impact, which is not insignificant. But, we sort of gloss over that revenues were up 17% for Netflix. They didn't give specifics on sort of advertising revenues, but they did say that sort of growth has been very, very high in that segment of the business, which is, I suppose, in parts to be expected because it's off a small base, but that's a key area for Netflix, right? They've stopped focusing on subscriber growth. So now it becomes, how do you squeeze more juice out of what you already have? And part of that is advertising, on your lower cost, less premium tier. So I think all in all, a really good set of numbers out of Netflix. And I saw the share got punished on the day, but I think Netflix, in their own words, said that they expect that they're going to lose that court case against the Brazilian tax authority and that they're going to have to pay those funds. But sort of a one-off, I don't think that that's going to be a major impact going forward.
Okay.
And I think the focus should be on revenue growth, earnings growth, etc.
Okay, well, Jordan, after the show today, let's go Netflix and chill. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights on what has moved investors' money today. That was Jordan Toy from Legacy Family Wealth.